You're listening to Let's Stay Together, a podcast about Fruit Basket by Natsuki Takaya. I'm Ellen,
And I'm Kayla.
and today we're talking about chapter 62 and 63.
Woo.
Woo! More beach. That was like the most chill woo that I think we've ever said. I have an announcement, which is that this is our last call for questions because the week that this comes out, we'll be recording the special because I'll be traveling. It's all my fault. So we have to record it a little bit early. So you need to send any questions to us by about like the 19th. That's this Friday. If you're listening to this when it comes out, it's on this Friday. And then the special episode, the mid-series special, will come out on October 30th. Yeah.
Just in time for Halloween.
Yeah. Spooky. So yeah, it comes out on October 30th. This is the last reminder. You can send us questions at staytogetherpodcast.com or staytogetherpodcast@gmail.com. Stay Together Pod on Twitter. You can message us on Tumblr. Yeah, anyway, that's all. That's my last announcement about that. And then we'll never talk about it again. I mean, you can ask us any questions. They can be about Fruba. They can be like fun or serious. Or you can ask questions about us or podcasting or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good time. And we'll answer them. And we're going to talk about like
as long as it's not like where do you live and what's your
Social
phone number.
security
then
number.
We won't answer those. But
I won't answer that. That's for sure.
But otherwise, we'll answer any questions.
In that episode, we're going to discuss kind of like what's happened overall and the themes overall and stuff that we've noticed and answer these questions. That will be what we cover. It'll be a good time. Yep. So yeah, so today, let's jump in. We're going to discuss chapters 62 and 63. We'll do our summary now, and then we'll discuss it, and then have spoilers after that. Like we always do.
Sounds like a party.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. You're invited. I mean... Okay. Chapter 62 begins with Toru refreshing us about what happened last time. So she met Isuzusoma, the horse of the zodiac, and she wonders, as she was wondering at the end of the last chapter, if Akito might be the rooster of the zodiac. Shigure interrupts her from her thoughts to let her know that Akito has asked him to bring Kyo with them today to the guest house where Akito is staying. Kyo and Toru say at the same time, and Shigure is like, oh wow, you're so in sync, which is hilarious. Kyo is like, just wait, that means she's... But Toru excitedly cuts him off and says, it's amazing, that's wonderful. And Kyo is like, huh? She says, blushing, with tears in her eyes, you've been invited, Kyo-kun. You too, Kyo-kun. It's not the banquet, she thinks, but even so, Kyo-kun, the cat-san, gets to join them. It's wonderful, isn't it? She says out loud. It's really wonderful, isn't it? And Kyo frowns. He says, be a good girl and wait for me to come back, okay? And he bonks her on the head in his usual way of showing affection to her. As he walks away, Shigure is like, it's wonderful, isn't it? And teases him. And he's like, shut up. The summons can't be a good thing. Ooh, scary, Shigure says. Are you only nice to Toru-kun then? Kyo looks back over his shoulder and he sees Toru smiling and seeing them off. We cut to the guest house where Yuki is miffed that Kyo is there. Don't tell me Akito called for him. And Shigure is like, I only do what I'm told. And tells Kyo to go and see Akito. It's the same as on New Year's, Kyo says, looking upset. She's been left alone again. What the hell are you all doing? Did you come here on vacation so that you could just leave her by herself? Then why are you here, Yuki asks. You can't go against Akito either, so don't talk like you're superior. I'll warn you one more time. Don't be stupid and lose it in front of Akito. Shut the hell up, you stupid bastard, Kyo shouts and punches at Yuki. But he stops his punch right beside Yuki's face without following through. We see Kyo's face, eyes wide and angry, and Yuki looking somewhat disgruntled, but unfazed. Kyo hesitates and then punches the wall beside him instead, and walks off. Shigure asks why Yuki didn't fight back like usual, and he says, no more. He needs to realize that he and I are both made that way, that in the end, that's all we are. I have a note here that says, what's Yuki's expression here? I wanted to ask you how you would describe it, because I couldn't figure out how to describe it.
Like when he's not getting punched?
Yeah, when he's not getting punched. So he says, he needs to realize that he and I are both made that way on the right-hand page.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Call it, I don't know, sort of resigned?
Yeah. I feel like this whole time he's a little bit resigned.
Yeah, because I was going to call his expression on the, previous page flip in the encounter with Kyo as, somewhere between determined and resigned.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's
kind
just...
to be both, but yes.
Yeah, but he's just kind of like... He's kind of like, what? What are you going to do? Basically.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, Yuki's really showing some gumption.
This is how it is. What are you going to do? Kind of thing.
Yeah, basically.
Right there.
And Kyo won't go through with it, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it's a really interesting scene. I think we'll talk about that one.
Oh, we will,
Yeah.
for sure. But for now, let's move on. I just wanted to know. Yeah, I couldn't figure out. I describe a lot of mixed expressions this time, and that was one I was just like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask Kayla because I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like Yuki in these chapters is full of like, I understand things now. Like they're not good. I'm not happy about them, but I understand things now. So
Enlightened,
yeah.
a little bit. So Kyo makes his way down to the room where Akito is, and Akito calls for him to come in. It's been a while since we spoke face to face, Akito says. Come in, my poor little monster. We cut away to the beach house, and Tori looks over the out from the porch and thinks about Kyo. I was so excited that I didn't realize that going over there means that he'll see Akito-san. I wonder if Akito-san has a special relationship with Kyo-kun too. If Akito-san is someone that Kyo-kun fears, Toru thinks. She imagines Akito's scary face and wonders again if he's the rooster, and then shakes her head. I shouldn't worry about that right now, she thinks.
As a side note, I really like that panel of Akito when she's thinking if he's the rooster or not.
Yeah, it's
really
so
cool.
creepy.
The way it's like patterned and everything.
Yeah, it's like half-toned. Akito's expressions in this are really... They get more increasingly scary, I think, actually, as these particular chapters go on. It kept getting like worse and worse last time, but in these in particular, some of them are really... they just are very piercing glares and stuff like that. This one is one of them. Yeah, it has this kind of like black halftone texture over it that makes it kind of dark and creepy. She imagines Akito's scary face. Yes. Okay. She says, she shakes her head and says, I shouldn't worry about that now. She remembers Kyo saying, be a good girl and wait for me to come back, okay? And she clasps her hands and wishes, please let Kyo-kun come back feeling even a little bit happy. A strong wish. Back in the lion's den, Akito asks Kyo how their bet is going. You know, the bet we all know. I mean, the bet. Akito explains it's the bet that they made that Kyo could beat Yuki before he graduates from high school. It's impossible, isn't it? Akito says. You can't win, can you? You just can't beat him, can you? From the beginning, the cat was made such that it can never beat the rat. Kyo grimaces and he looks upset and sort of apprehensive about how this conversation is going. You will never in your life be able to beat Yuki, Akito says. That's how you were made from the beginning. It's the course of destiny carved out by those possessed by vengeful spirits, the fate set by blood. I've told you that's just how it is, haven't I? And we see a time from the past. Kyo grabs Akito by the collar. Shut up, he says. You think I care about fate? I'll smash that fate. I will beat Yuki. I will beat him. In the memory, Akito says, well then, shall we make a bet? And looks truly conniving, I think, in this scene. If you really can beat Yuki by the time you graduate from high school, I'll stop calling you monster. I'll even let you join the Zodiac. But in the case that you don't, I'll put you in confinement until you die. Because if that's the case, you really are nothing but dirt. In the present, Akito plays with a wind chime that's hanging in the room and says it looks like he'll be winning that bet. And Kyo argues, there's still time, you don't know that. You would tell me that which I don't know, Akito says, and throws the wind chime at Kyo, which scrapes his face. It's shaped like a kind of this bell shape, and it
looks like a Chimico.
Oh!
The Pokemon Chimico.
Pokemon strikes again. I mean,
it's a Chimico, he's tackle.
Yeah. It's super effective. Why don't you understand, Akito asks. Have you forgotten? You need to remember. Remember that you are a monster. We see Akito's face, pupils narrowed, enraged, and his head tilting to the side in kind of intimidating way. This is like, Akito starts to really... Akito was kind of like sitting off to the side before he threw the wind chime at Kyo, and now he's like standing up and looking really ominous. We can see that Kyo looks frightened. It's because you're a monster that your mother died, Akito says, and Kyo says, it's not my fault, echoing his words as a child. It is your fault, Akito says, and he takes Kyo's wrist. You killed your mother. Stop it, Kyo shouts and tries to pull his arm away. Don't give me orders, Akito says. Your poor mother, even though she gave birth to a monster in human skin, she bravely protected it, raised it, but in the end, it was too much for her. The little monster killed her, and now that monster, her son, won't even mourn her death. Kyo remembers his father yelling at him at his mother's funeral. What he says in the memory is, Kyo, don't you understand your mother's feelings? This wasn't an accident, it was suicide. She killed herself because of you. Don't you understand how hard it was on her? Can a monster like you understand? You should have been the one to die, Akito says in the present. No matter how you look at it, everyone would be a lot happier if you had never been born. I killed her, he thinks. I did. I have a question for you about this scene also. Do you think that these are his thoughts as a child or now? Because we see in that like an illustration of him as the accompanying visual is him as a child again at the funeral.
I was thinking it was his thoughts as a child.
Okay. That's what I thought too.
Yeah,
But
just because we
I was
see
like,
like
I don't know.
his father talking to him, and then his like surprise reaction as a child, and then the yeah, and then the thought over his image of a child as a child.
As a child, it's weirdly like interspersed.
Yeah, I mean,
Akito,
I think
so
it's
a little hard to
probably
tell.
deliberately a little ambiguous, but I would, yeah.
He might
I think,
still think that, but
I think like he doesn't consciously think that anymore. But I think with Akito beating down on him, it's probably bringing that back up to the surface. So.
He like remembers his reaction as a child, and he also remembers what looks like an arm in a pool of blood. So you can see like the arm. It's in a very very thin panel in between that one of Kyo as a child and then what's going on now. Stop it! He yells at Akito, and he lowers his head. Please stop! Like he actually almost like he's begging Akito to stop. And Akito smirks as if he's like done what he set out to do with this conversation. Akito changes the subject to Toru. Perhaps she's the reason that for Kyo's misunderstanding that he's like as if he's not a monster. Akito heard that Toru saw him in his true form and isn't upset by it. Maybe she's the monster, Akito says. She's so good-natured, it's unnatural. No human being is like that. Toru Honda is a monster, Akito says. She's a freak just like you. Kyo remembers hugging her after when she saw him, like caught up with him in his true form, and her yelling at him about wanting to stay together. How can you say that? Kyo asks, and he starts to get angry again. You weren't there when it happened. It's not like you were born a monster, so how would you don't know how scared she was then. So how can you say those things? Kyo remembers that moment again and thinks her hands and her voice were shaking with fear. Her face was pale. She was terrified, Kyo says. And she still didn't run away because... And Akito is like, oh, shut up. And Kyo tries to talk again, but Akito continues to like say shut up and scream over him and cover his ears. Kyo says she held onto my hand because... And then he thinks, she knew that if she let go of my hand, I would probably never have come back. I might never have trusted anyone again. It's not like she took away all of my pain. There's no way that she could fill that chasm, but that doesn't matter. I couldn't expect her to fix me. What's important is that she's not afraid to be by my side. He imagines Toru bringing food and smiling at the beach, that she'll get excited about tiny things and smile and be happy when we're together. Why? I wish that she would think about only herself more. So why doesn't she ever regret wasting time with me or think it's stupid or realize that I have nothing to offer? Kyo remembers Momiji saying, it's pointless to think about those things. The traveler didn't think about those things. That might be stupid to some people, but it's not stupid to me. Kyo puts his head in his hands, and he continues to remember what Momiji said. Kyo Yuki, when you close your eyes, what do you think? We see Kyo standing with his head in his hands, and he imagines Toru calling for him, Kyo-kun, Kyo-kun, and imagines her holding a frying pan and smiling. And Kyo looks up from his hands, crying, and thinks, I love you. I love you the way you are. I love you so much. And that's the end of chapter 62. Oh my god, guys. Oh my god. When I reread that this time, I was like, oh fuck, oh shit. It's so good. Anyway. It's so good. His expression is wonderful. And he cries. I love this callback to... We'll talk about it. I love the callback to The Very Foolish Traveler. I forgot there was going to be a callback to this, too.
Yeah, I forget.
Anyway, someone might have mentioned it. I feel like that was one of the things that someone mentioned a long time ago.
I'm not sure.
Anyway, so chapter 63 continues exactly where we left off from chapter 62. With Kyo thinking... Kyo is still with Akito. He imagines Toru smiling, imagines her walking up to him and smiling at the beach, pulling her in the inner tube. And he thinks, when did it start? When did I start thinking that my name had a special ring whenever she would say it? When did I start telling myself that I would do anything over and over again if I knew it would make her smile? When did I start loving you so much? And we see Kyo, the time where Kyo and Toru were on the roof and he was like teaching her how to punch, I guess.
Yes.
Her right straight that she threw. Loving you so much that I couldn't stand it. Toru, he thinks, so we see him crying in the present. Are you crying? Kyo, why are you crying? Akito asks, looking at him. Are you mortified? Could it be that you love her? You and Toru Honda? That would be perfect for a monster to fall in love with a monster, Akito says, snickering while Kyo looks dismayed beside him. What? Akito says, turning and looking at him. Why are you looking at me like that? Akito says and slaps Kyo across the face. It's not my fault. It's your fault for refusing to understand, and that woman's for thinking that she's special even though she's an outsider. If you hate her so much, Kyo says, then why did you let her live in that house? That's messed up. You could have just said no. What are you thinking? What are you scheming? He thinks. Is he using her? And he imagines Toru again, innocently carrying shopping bags and coming home from school in her uniform with her school bag. For what? He thinks. I don't understand. Is he trying to use her? Kyo thinks. You always make me out to be the bad guy, Akito says. What's your problem? Do you actually love that woman? Akito says, starting to get angry. Kyo retorts, but he can't get a word in. You're even more foolish than I thought, Akito says, you despicable monster. You killed your own mother, and now you think you have the right to fall in love? You think you'd be allowed such a thing? Kyo looks taken aback. We see a shocked face. We see the words, I won't allow it, in quotation marks, in Kyo's memory. Say Kyo, Akito says. Think carefully. Who is the one most at fault? And we see the words repeated again, I won't allow it. Who is the one who's responsible for putting you in this awkward position? Akito says, pointing at Kyo. Kyo looks away, dismayed, and says, it's me. And he remembers his father saying it's your fault. From the funeral. Perhaps a little, Akito says, but surely much of the fault lies with the scheming woman. Kyo says, no, I don't. I don't love her, he says. He thinks of her, but he looks away, as if it's painful for him to think about her. There's no way I'd love her. I would never, in my whole life, love anyone. I'll never fall in love, he says, looking down, grimacing. No more. I don't want him to say bad things about her because of me. That's right, Akito says. I see, I was jumping to conclusions. That's obviously right, you don't love her. For once you've judged wisely. You can't beat Yuki anyway. It's only a matter of time before you'll be confined. But that's for the best, you know. If you drag that woman or Kazuma or anyone else any further, it would only end up hurting them. The best thing would be for you not to exist. It's all right. Even when you're locked up, I'll go see you. I'll be with you, so you won't be lonely. As Akito speaks, we can see a dark texture building on the page. Kyo kneels and drops to his knees on the floor. He looks down, head down as if he's defeated. Akito gets closer to Kyo and kneels on the floor as well and caresses his hair. But, Kyo says, clenching the floor, you can't stand me. I like, Akito says. But his face clearly doesn't match what he's saying. It's this really, how would you describe this expression? It's
evil.
like expression pop quiz time. Yes. I was trying to think
Kind
of something
like,
else.
Cruelly self-satisfied.
Yes, that's a good way to describe it. That's a very apt way to describe it. It's a cruel, it's for sure a cruel expression. And clearly Akito feels like the situation has been resolved, right? We see Kyo below looking really upset, eyes kind of narrowed, and his head is still down. I like you. I really do love you, Kyo. From now on, be a good boy during the short time that you have left living on the outside, Akito says, as he hugs Kyo. We cut to later. Yuki passes by what looks like a bathroom, and sees Akito washing his hands in the sink. There's like a significant amount of wash sound effects happening. Akito, what happened to Kyo? Yuki asks, and Akito says that he let Kyo go home. He doesn't need to call him anymore and has finished his business with Kyo. I feel sick, Akito says, from touching him so much, looking up at his hands, lifting them out of the water. Yuki looks away, sort of dismayed. Oh, that's right. Kyo says he hates Toru Honda. I wonder if that's true. Probably, Yuki says. Akito looks like contemplative briefly, and then finishes washing his hands and walks away. Yuki turns off the sink for Akito. And after Akito leaves, he says there's no way that he could hate her.
In addition to everything else, Akito doesn't care about the environment.
No, Akito doesn't give a shit about anything. I like how Akito just like looks up like, interesting, and then leaves. And leaves the water running like an asshole. Can we chalk that up to being the 90s? Or whatever, the early 2000s. We see Kyo walking back toward the to the beach house, and we see some kind of chaotic inner thoughts that he's having. You have the right to fall in love. The one responsible for putting your mother's awkward position. And then he says out loud, I know. The best thing would be for you not to exist. And Kyo shouts, I know. So he's remembering the words of Akito and reacting to them. I know, he says. I've never done anything but hurt people, he thinks. He remembers his mother and thinks, why didn't my mother just kill me? She could have killed me, so why am I alive? Shamelessly forcing my existence on other people, even now. He walks into the living room and calls for Toru and looks around the house for her and calls her name. Why am I still looking for her? He thinks. Kyo, he remembers a time, and he remembers Shisho. This is the same memory that we've seen twice now. Mm-hmm. So it's the one from last chapter that was alluded to briefly, and from, what chapter did I say it was? 52, where they go and visit Shisho's house. And there was an allusion to this from Shisho's side of the memory. Look at a time in the past. Shisho calls to Kyo as he walks. It's the same memory where Kyo is like kind of, he's been outside, he's barefoot, and you can tell that he's like kind of grungy, like he's been outside for a long time. Wait, Kyo, Shisho says. It would be a shame if you stepped on it. And we can see that Kyo is stopped beside a dandelion. What's the point? Why bother protecting such a tiny flower? Shisho, Kyo says. You know what they say about me, an existence made up of others' sacrifices and others' lives, stealing everything, trampling on everything until there's nothing left. Even so, Shisho says, the reason you are alive now is that you haven't given up hope, is it not? We see Kyo's face, looking terrified, crying. It's not true that everyone in this world has rejected you. You know this, don't you? Shisho asks. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have any hope, Kyo says. You do. No, I don't, he says, and he stomps on the dandelion. I don't, he says. Even if you don't have any now, Kazuma says, surely it will come to you again. Just as no matter how hard you try to keep it away, despair will attack you again. In the same manner, Shisho says, hope will return to you. Again and again. Kyo remembers in the present the words, it will surely bloom. I'm sorry, Shisho. Now I understand. Back then I pretended not to understand you, Kyo thinks, but deep down inside I knew already. I knew. Just like there's despair in the world, there are people who will hold out their hand to you, he thinks. He remembers himself as a child speaking to a woman with long hair. You're lonely, aren't you? She says. He thinks she won't ever come back. Come on, Spunky, she says. A man's promise, she says, and we see them fist pumping. I think I made her sad, the woman says. Even so, Kyo thinks it blossomed in front of me. My treasure. I'm sure she's lonely too, we see in the memory. It kept blossoming, a small flower, Kyo thinks. Then we see in the photo what looks like young Toru from behind. So the woman that Kyo was talking to all this time was Toru's mother. Kyo finds Toru out on the beach making another sandcastle, and he sees her from behind in almost exactly the same position, sitting. A tiny flower, he thinks. My precious, precious Toru, he calls. And she jumps up and sees him coming from behind. The scene is adorable. I just want to talk about it. Stop and talk about it for a second. Where she's building the castle. Mm-hmm. He watches her for a bit, kind of like putting it together and looking contemplative and pausing. It's really nice. Yeah. So he calls to her from behind. Of course, it causes her to jump. She wonders why he's back so soon, but she's like, maybe you're not back yet or whatever. She asks if, so I guess he wasn't there for that long, just long enough to have a really strained conversation with Akito. Yeah. She asks if he forgot something and then notices his face, and she reaches up to kind of as if she was about to touch his cheek because she notices the mark from where Akito slapped him. Yeah, I had a little fight, he says. A fight with Akito-san, she says. He said I never have to go back again, Kyo says, and Toru is, of course. I don't mind. I feel bad for you since you were happy for me, Kyo says, but I don't mind not being invited. I guess I just don't care anymore, he says, and he smiles, looking actually relieved for once. Normally he also has these strained expressions, just like we see with everybody else. Yeah. Toru pauses, not saying anything. And Kyo's like, what, do you not want me back? And she's like, no, of course I do. And he says he was kidding. And she says, welcome back, Kyo-kun, and smiles with her hands behind her back. Yeah, he says. It's good to be back. I love you, he thinks, as Toru smiles. I don't want to take anything anymore. I don't want to trample anything ever again. I did wish that you would stick with me wherever I ended up. Kyo suddenly has a memory of a woman. We can see that it's in reverse, but you can tell that she's in like a pool of blood. There's blood all over her head and on her, coming out of her mouth, like as if she's severely injured. Her eyes are actually kind of like dull, as if she might be dead. He remembers the words, I won't allow it, with this memory of this woman. He pauses and thinks, but I don't wish that anymore. If you drag them any further, it would only end up hurting them, he remembers Akito's words. I couldn't possibly wish my fate on you. I won't wish it. But please, at least during the time I have left, I want... Toru says, interrupting his thoughts. That's right, Kyo-kun, what would you like for dinner? Fish. He says, Roger, today I will wave my arms. And she says, but then she trips. And Kyo catches her by the head. Look, you don't have to wave your arms. Just watch your step. And she's like, yes, I'm sorry. Man, he says, smiling, you're hopeless. I want to be near you, he thinks. He takes her hand, and they walk back toward the house together. Until the time when I must go away, I want to be with you till the end. And that's the end of chapter 63.
Aww.
Oh, it's so good.
Lots of stuff.
It was so, I know, right? I was like, yay, when I read this. Yeah, that's the good shoujo. That's what we were waiting for 11 volumes.
Romance.
Romance. But also, like, there's a lot of dark family genre in these two.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot in these chapters.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Takaya is good at really evening out the dark family drama with the, like, really, really fluffy romance. Like, the more romantic it gets, the worse the family drama it gets, I feel like. Still, every time we leave Akito, I feel relieved.
Yeah.
Like, oh, good. Kyo's back with Toru. It's going to be a good time now. We're going to get to see some fluff.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know where to start to discuss these chapters. There's so much.
I know. I was so excited. I was like, we have so many things to talk about.
Yeah.
So many things. Do you want to talk good stuff or bad stuff first? We could talk about that. We can start that way. We've done that before, I know.
I've decided I want to start with the Kyo and Yuki parallels.
Okay. That's a good place to start.
Yeah. Anyway, so obviously they both have their big I love you revelations.
Yes.
In these each chapters.
Yes.
Yep. And in kind of similar ways where they have kind of an internal revelation and have it kind of said in the same way where it's just like a big, like, I love you internal thought kind of thing.
They both cry.
Yeah, they both cry.
I mean,
they both have kind of a confrontation with Akito that leads to these realizations, and then they're both shown kind of feeling relieved afterward, even though it's implied, at least implied in Yuki's, obviously shown in Kyo's case to be a traumatic conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But they both seem to kind of be like aware and like accepting of kind of where they are in their life after talking to Akito.
Yeah, Akito, despite everything that Akito does is like the opposite of what Akito really wants in these chapters, I feel like. Akito wants to be like controlling of them and uses the things that Akito does are a catalyst for them realizing some of their deeper feelings and then going and acting on them, which is like the opposite. And they all revolve around Toru, which is the opposite of what Akito wants.
Like Akito's trying to pull them back, but he winds up just kind of pushing them forward in their like development as people. So
joke's on you, Akito. I mean, what? Yeah, and
I think, and like Yuki's line about like realizing that they're both made that way is really interesting, especially since like we immediately have like Akito saying that like that's basically the same thing with like that's just how you're made. Yeah,
it's like you'll never be able to beat him because that's how it is. It's like your fate to always be lesser than the rat.
Yeah, so it's very like obviously they mean different things when they say them, but it's kind of like because Yuki has come to his kind of like point of acceptance before Kyo, because Kyo hasn't had the conversation with Akito yet. So Akito's kind of like aware of where they are and where this is going and everything, and it's kind of like we're not going to do this shit anymore, basically.
You mean Yuki?
Yeah.
Yes.
If I have any more Kyo and Yuki comments.
Well, there's their non-fight.
Yeah.
Which you kind of just referred to, but I think the fact we could talk about it from Kyo's perspective instead of Yuki's, where like he punches to hit Yuki and then he stops himself, which is I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because we also then learn about the bet. We can finally talk about the bet.
Yeah.
We've talked about this many times in the spoilers, but we can finally talk about the bet.
Yeah, and it's been kind of alluded to because obviously, like, Kyo's made mentions of, like, I'm going to beat Yuki and I'm going to join the Zodiac before, but now we have, like, exactly the full story on that.
Yeah, like, why is it that he thinks that he can do that? Well, it's because Akito made a bet that if Kyo beats Yuki by the time they finish high school, then Akito will, like, quote-unquote, let him in the Zodiac and stop calling him a monster, which is really interesting. I seriously doubt that would ever happen, but Akito thinks that it's a sure bet because he thinks, or at least, like, what he says to Kyo is that it's just the way things are. It's the fate of the curse. The one possessed by the cow will always be lesser than the one who's possessed by the rat.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't know. In the scene right before that, Kyo clearly demonstrated that he could hit Yuki if he wanted to. But I don't think he really wants to, which is kind of an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, I think he kind of like he sees that Yuki's making no motion to like fight back or even evade at that moment, and so that kind of throws him off and makes him stop. And then, like,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't
sure
know.
he even fully understands like his own thoughts in that scene, but him like
I don't
stopping and
think
then
so.
hitting the wall instead when he realizes Yuki's not fighting
And he
back.
clearly like there's a little panel of his like hand beside Yuki's face. Like you can clearly see that he relaxes his fist too. Like
Mm-hmm.
he has like a moment where he like contemplates it and then he hits the wall.
Yeah.
So so I don't know. I mean, we don't get his inner monologue at that point, so we don't
Mm-hmm.
know what he's thinking or if he's even thinking anything.
Yeah.
Um, it might have just been a reaction or something, but
Yeah. I just like how we have the one panel of Shigure like flinching, like he expects it to
yeah,
become a fight, but
yeah. Then Yuki's like, no, he needs to realize that like that's what's going on.
yeah.
Yuki's Yuki's so funny in these because he's like the he is like enlightened. Like
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. He acts like he's kind of like he's trying to move beyond like where they're at right now.
Yeah. I feel like
Right?
he's like become very aware of kind of what they're doing, what Akito is doing to them in these chapters, and it's kind of like I'm not doing this shit anymore. Like,
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. It's like they've known, I feel like the characters have known for a while that, they've been living in this circumstance where people in the family, in addition to Akito, like I'm thinking like people like Haru, for example,
yeah.
like Haru's relationship with Yuki, is like they have this world that's being created around them, and they're starting to see, especially Yuki in the most recent chapters, is seeing how that is just like fabricated.
Yeah.
He feels like now after living outside of the family he has kind of like the hope to move forward or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And Kyo's starting to think the same thing. Like he actually uses very similar language as Kyo did a couple of chapters ago.
Yeah.
Like you kind of pointed out, they have these parallel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like at the end where he says like, I guess I don't care anymore.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Yuki's like, I don't care anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of the thing you talk about them like, like realizing that everything is like fabricated. I think it's because they've been out of it for a while. Like,
Yeah.
they've been living outside of the influence of Akito and all the family for a while now, and now they're suddenly
Yeah,
back
like
into
a
that.
year.
Yeah, and now suddenly they're
Over a
pulled back
year.
in where they're around everybody, and Akito's exerting his control on everyone, and they're like, "This is bullshit."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, which it is.
yeah,
I mean, Akito just says things that are like blatant lies to them, and they're all kind of like, yeah, I don't know.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now they're back into it, and Akito's like trying the same old tricks.
Mm-hmm.
And Akito's like, that totally worked. And then
Yeah.
Kyo is like, JK, I'm actually still in love with her. Like,
Yeah,
um, basically, like, everything that Akito does is like, okay, I'm satisfied. Kyo doesn't have to come back anymore. I've taken care of the situation.
yeah.
The misunderstanding, quote unquote, that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I find that to be very interesting. And then they're all, I mean, mostly Yuki and Kyo are the focus of this
Mm-hmm.
kind of like energy, or like change that's happening. But I think Haru too, even
Yeah,
is kind of
I
like,
think you can see it with
I don't
everybody.
know, like it gets to him.
Yeah,
but,
you can see it with
yeah.
everybody where they're kind of like, "This is old now." Like, like with Momiji being like, "I really
Yeah.
want to go back to the beach house and everything," and Haru's so like, "I wish you would stop," but
Yeah.
Oh.
It's more like resignation
yeah,
rather than fear, which is very interesting. So things are starting to change.
Yeah.
And then we have all like Shigure's comments about being like, well, who's the one who's misunderstanding
Yeah.
now? It's like, I see. Akito is the one. It's happening.
and that word misunderstanding,
Shigure was right.
yeah, it gets used a lot, like, because I think it was
Yes.
used in the conversation with Yuki too, that we only see a little bit of Akito and Yuki.
Mm-hmm.
The whole like, don't misunderstand. I think we have the flashback of Akito saying that to Yuki.
Yeah, like don't misunderstand. Don't think that you can have hope
Yeah.
in this world. I think is exactly what it says in the other
Yeah,
version.
and then like we have Shigure saying like who's
As
yeah
well.
like who's misunderstanding, and then there's the whole thing about Kyo and Toru with Akito saying like this is the source of the misunderstanding or whatever.
And Akito's like, I'll take care of this misunderstanding. Yes. Yeah. A related comment about Akito and Kyo. So I think it's interesting that, so for all Kyo, so Kyo is normally like isolated and excluded or whatever. But the interesting thing that I think is that Akito actually treats Kyo just like everybody else, with the same kind of like, with the same abusive language and tendencies and whatever, and manipulation, this emotional manipulation of being like, making the bet, and using all the same kind of like tactics that Akito uses with everyone else. He does exactly the same thing
Yeah.
with Kyo. So kind of like in Akito's desire for power, he ironically kind of treats Kyo the same way as everybody else, which I find to be really interesting since he's supposed to be excluded.
Even down to the same, like, I really do love you kind of.
Yeah. It's like, I'll be the one who visits you when you're confined. And Kyo's like, but you hate me. And Akito's like, no, I love you. Definitely.
Yeah, that seems so creepy.
It's super creepy. And then later Akito's like washing his hands because of, he's like, oh, touching Kyo makes me feel sick. It's kind of ironic that Yuki finds him when he was the one who like threw his chopsticks away after he like touched chopsticks with Kyo in that one chapter.
Yeah, I wonder if he kind of like is like thinking of anything like that, because you can see him kind of make a face when like Akito says, I feel sick from touching him so much.
Yeah, Yuki probably reacted to that. Hold on, we can look. I mean, yeah, he kind of just like looks away. Like, I don't know. He doesn't say anything, but he's probably contemplating stuff. Yeah. I don't know if it's that specifically, because he also is like, oh, Kyo says he hates Toru Honda, and Yuki is like, yeah, right. But then he says probably, which I think is great. Yuki is like really like playing into what Akito wants.
Yeah, like Yuki just like going along with that whole thing.
And then Akito's kind of like, and then leaves. Like, I find that to be really a little interesting interaction too. Like, what is Akito thinking about? I don't know.
It's also interesting, like we're talking about like Yuki's development, that he's like, he like goes in and talks to Akito. Like, and we, like the first time we saw him with Akito, he was like utterly terrified.
He's petrified. Yeah, that is a good point. He like casually goes in and it's just like, yep. And yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
We haven't seen him interacting with Akito since the night where they chatted.
Yeah,
right?
and we didn't even see that whole conversation yet. We just saw. I don't even know. Do we ever see that whole conversation? I feel like we see more of it, but
I'm not sure. But yeah, what we saw before was just them talking, and we see Yuki's thoughts.
Yeah, we don't see their actual dialogue, but
Akito just smiles menacingly most of the time. So anyway, so I thought that was something that just came, like, it's something that I picked up on this time that I haven't before, is like, well, Akito just does exactly the same thing as he does to everybody, to Kyo, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Someone who's supposed to be shunned gets the same treatment. Not good treatment, but the same treatment.
Yeah. It's like, it's not
by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, this has been obvious that it's not any better to be like liked by Akito than hated by Akito, but it's kind of interesting because like Yuki's kind of Akito's favorite, and Kyo's probably like the least favorite, like, but it's not any better to be the favorite than the least favorite.
No, it's better to not be cared about at all, I think. It seems like
Kyo remembers Yuki telling him like not to lose it, which is interesting too.
Yeah. Well, he's worried about Toru too, so. And Yuki's right, but Akito also, I mean, not Akito, Kyo successfully, I think, at least for now, I don't know, seemed to successfully deflect Akito's like suspicions by being like, you're right, I don't love her. And Akito's like, that's right, you don't love her.
One stylistic choice I kind of made note of is how often in the scene with Akito that Kyo's eyes are drawn with the slit pupils, which, like, I think we only really see that when he first transforms into his true form, or at least that's the most prominent one where we see like his things, but he's drawn with it like through most of the scene. But there's a couple notable points when it goes back to normal, which is usually when he's like kind of having a genuine like emotional moment or whatever. It's kind of an interesting choice that I noticed.
The other interesting thing is like Akito's eyes are kind of drawn similarly.
Yeah, in a couple of scenes.
In some of those scenes. Yeah, that's Kyo's scared face, I think. It's his really, really scared face. The one specific one, the biggest one where you can clearly see the slit pupils is like, it's right after Akito throws the wind chime at him.
And you can also see it in the like flashbacks with baby Kyo. But
I think it's drawn like that in the earlier chapters too. Like in the earlier ones where we see scenes of him like that as a child, but it's much more pronounced here, I think.
Yeah, like I think it's kind of like a scared, angry kind of like reaction kind of thing, but it's sort of interesting to have that in, like, with all the conversation of him being a monster.
A monster. Totally. I agree with you. Just further characterizes him as a monster. By giving him this kind of like other paranormal, it's not the way to describe it, but like not his normal kind of like expressions, and then also just a non-standard, not like all the other kind of characters'
Yeah,
expressions.
and we see it go back to normal, like, mostly when he's talking about Toru.
Mm-hmm. When he kind of like, so the first time I think is kind of like when he gives in and he like begs Akito not to talk about that again, and then Akito starts to bring something else up, and then he starts to get emotional again thinking about Toru, about the time, and saying how afraid she was. I love how Akito's just like la la la, I'm not listening in that scene too, which is interesting. Akito's denial is strong.
Yeah.
And then he continues to think about her, and his pupils are kind of like normal. Then in the next chapter he gets angry again, and it happens again when he's like yelling at Akito, like, if you hate her so much, then why'd you let her live in that house? And then they kind of go back. Akito also has these really interesting like scared expressions that, like I said, there's one where Akito's pupils are kind of small too, and also just where like the eye Akito's eyes are not fully like darkened. I don't know how to describe it. Like sometimes they're like smaller, the like kind of pupil part is smaller. Sometimes the like the iris, I guess technically is smaller, not just the pupil. Yeah. You can also see like Kyo's dad also has that kind of like angry expression where his pupils are really small in that flashback, and also I think in others that we've seen, Kyo and his dad actually kind of have that in common physically, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, something I know. I think I'm here when I noticed, but it's like he really does kind of look like his dad. Like
probably like 2 chapters ago. That's what, or maybe a couple. Yeah,
like
the one where Cosmo goes to visit his dad. I was like, yeah, they're drawn in a very similar way, and like Kyo has a very distinct kind of like look, character design wise, and his dad very clearly has a similar one. Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think it just makes him, I don't know, it's used to show that he's afraid, but it's also used in these scenes where Akito is saying like, you're a monster, you're the one who like killed your mother because you're a monster, stuff like that.
Yeah, and we get the full kind of reveal on what happened to his mother, which has been hinted at before, but I think this is the first time it's directly said.
Yeah, his father in the flashback is like, it was suicide and it was your fault. And then baby Akito was like, I'm the one who killed her. We've seen that scene before. It's kind of interesting. Like, I guess that's when Cosmo's there, because Kyo is like, it's not my fault when Cosmo shows up, but then isn't there a scene where he like talks to his dad? The timeline of like that part of the funeral, like those scenes, is like Kyo's family yells at him, he goes outside, Cosmo goes to talk to him, and then he talks to his dad again, right? So is that supposed to be like, when is that supposed to be? Is that like the first time, or like the time after Cosmo comes and finds him?
I feel like it probably is before Cosmo comes, because it looks like baby Kyo looks like surprised, like to hear him being like himself being blamed like that. And then, like, when Cosmo finds him, he's like, repeating, "It's not my fault. It's not my fault."
Over and over again. Yeah. I think you're right. We had another scene with Cosmo that was repeated here, which is the one from, like I said, it's alluded to a couple of times. It was the last episode that we talked about, and like 3 or 4 ago.
Yeah.
Yes, it's this scene of Kyo in the past. He's been outside for a long time. Cosmo has gone and got him. So we saw the beginning of that memory before, where Cosmo goes and gets him, and then I guess as they're walking back with Cosmo, they see this flower, and Kyo comments about his life being like built on the sacrifices of others and the lives of others.
And we saw a couple glimpses of that, like last chapter, the chapter before, when he was talking about his beads.
It's kind of interesting that he thinks that. I don't know if there's like a lot to say about it yet, even still, other than the beads we talked about last time, where he says that they're made out of bones and they're like stained with blood, so there's some kind of like human sacrifice of some kind involved in keeping him in his human form.
Yeah, I do think the whole conversation about how like both hope and despair will come back to you again and again is pretty interesting.
Yeah, Cosmo's very wise.
Yeah, and like at the end of the chapter, he's come to the point where he's like, I don't want to like trample on anything ever again. So he's obviously thinking of that memory.
Yeah, to be careful with the things. It's a contrast to him saying, or him stepping on the thing in the past, on the flower in the past, and saying that his life is built on the sacrifices of others, as he's like taking another step toward being the like, independent man that he said that he was going to become.
Yeah, I feel like it's the difference between like the one who said like, I understand my life is meaningless, and him being like I'm being like, my life is meaningless, it's built on other sacrifice or whatever, to being like, I'm not going to be that person anymore. I'm not going to, trample other things and like be built on other people's sacrifices anymore. Yeah, but at the same time, like, well, he's seems to be in a better place at the end of this chapter. He's also kind of resigned to his like fate.
Yes.
Because at the end he just says like, until the time I must go away, I want to be with you, like with Toru. So.
And he also, like, some of the things that he says after he kind of admits that he's in love with her, like, why do you, I wish you would think of yourself more. Why do you waste time with me when I have nothing to offer? I think that's all, like, related to those feelings of being like, well, I'm just going to be locked away. So, like, why do you spend time with me? And she knows that, too. He knows that she knows that. Why do you waste your time with me? Such an interesting thing to say.
Yeah.
And sad thing to say.
Yeah. Although I don't think Toru knows yet about the confinement.
Oh, maybe you're right. We know.
But yeah.
Because it was mentioned before. Yeah. I think you're right. It's my bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. He has that. But then, of course, he's like, well, stay with me until then.
So it's sort of like, it almost feels like he like gives up on the, like, if I can beat Yuki, I can join the Zodiac bet and just be like, I just want to spend the time I have.
The time that I have.
Like with Toru. And
it's kind of interesting, too, because this is also, during the True Form arc, he was like, if you're going to run away, or like, if we're not going to be together. I can't remember exactly what he says, but he's like, I'll make it so bad that you won't feel sorry for me or whatever. It's like the opposite. He's like, I'll do something so bad that I'll push you away, to now at the point where he's like, I just want to enjoy the rest of the time that I have with you. It's been a long time. a long path of growth for Kyo. And it's interesting that he admits he latches onto this idea at this point now, after this time with Akito.
Yeah.
Should we talk about his relationship, what we saw with Toru's mother?
Yeah, that was a big reveal.
That's a big reveal. Yeah. When we recorded this, I was like, I don't know if I can call her that. Oh well, I'll just build up to it. And then I was like, oh yeah, it's
I think
mother.
it's pretty obvious. Yeah,
it's obvious. She says that this is like my.
Yeah. I mean, she looks like what we saw in flashbacks, and when she shows him the picture, and then it transitions into baby Toru. So I mean,
and then baby Toru transitions into into grown up Toru.
I think it's pretty safe to say.
It looks like her in a lot of the flashbacks. The first, like, some of them don't. They look a little different.
Like, especially this one in the panel where she's saying, "Come on," like that's classic Kyoko in that picture. Yeah.
Yeah, that smile.
And I really like the kind of sketchy style those couple of panels are drawn in. How she's drawn. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're blurred. They're kind of like textured over as well.
But yeah, so Kyo knew Toru's mom.
Kyo knew Toru's mother.
Yeah.
Big reveal. When it looks like when they were both quite young. In these memories, and they had a good relationship. It looks like she pats him on the head, she gives him a fist bump, and she shows him pictures of her daughter.
Yeah, and his narration in that part is interesting too. I mean, obviously they had a good relationship because it starts with like, there are people who will hold out their hand to you, and transitions to them interacting, and it has him saying like, she won't ever come back, and the memory of her saying a man's promise and saying I couldn't fulfill it, but so those are very interesting.
And he says even so it blossomed in front of me, it kept blossoming, a small flower.
Yeah, as we transition into Toru. So yeah, I don't know what to say about it right now, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, we'll come back back to that later. But like, the dialogue that Toru's mom's saying is really interesting too. So the things that she says in his memories of her are, "You aren't lonely, are you?" And then she says, "Come on, Spunky," and then a man's promise. And then she says, "My treasure," she says, "I think I made her sad," which is interesting. Because as far as we know, Toru's mom is the greatest. So, the last thing that she says is "my treasure," and she hints him the photo and says, I'm sure she's lonely too," which is really interesting. So yeah, there's some interesting times. We very rarely see people's memories of Kyoko other than Toru.
Yeah.
So this is yet another person. We saw Uo's and Hana's before, and now Kyo's. So now we know they have a connection.
Yeah, I was gonna say pretty unexpected.
Yes.
Person to have a memory of Kyoko. Like.
Yes. He also is like, now she's gone and all this other stuff. So
yeah.
I like the way we talked about it. I think we talked about it before we started recording, but I was like, I didn't realize they we're gonna bring the Foolish Traveler back. We forgot about it.
Yeah.
Someone may have mentioned it to us in a message previously. I can't remember who right now, and I looked at and I couldn't find it before. But yeah, it's very interesting. So yes, Kyo remembers. He starts thinking about Toru and how she was afraid, and he's like, he thinks of all these things about her. Like, I wish she would only should think about herself more. Like, doesn't she like realize that I have nothing to offer or whatever? And then we see Momiji's like, it's pointless to think about things. The traveler didn't think about them. And then the same memory that's like Yuki, or the same words, Yuki and Kyo, when you close your eyes, what do you see? And then he has that memory of her, which is amazing. It's great.
Yeah, and that like leads right into his "I love you" realization.
I love you so much, he says. He thinks.
Yeah, I like the Foolish Traveler as just kind of a good kind of collection of a theme for this series.
Those things aren't important. The being selfish and like putting yourself first is not important. The things that matter more are like the things that you can give to other people, I guess. Yeah. As a theme, which I feel like Toru is a very strong embodiment of. So. Yeah. I love that the I don't know. Did you have any other like serious things to talk about? I just had some other things that I noticed.
I don't think so.
Okay. I was just thinking I love that the images that he or the memories he has of her, just like the most mundane. Like the one that when he thinks like I love you is her like holding a frying pan. I guess it might be when they went to visit Shisho's. I can't remember if it's from a specific time. But I was just like, oh, it's so charming.
Yeah. I still like I love how excited Toru is that Kyo got invited, even though it's not actually a good thing, but
no, but she's like, you got invited too. Like and he's like really upset about it, but then he just tells her to be good. Yeah. Instead of being.
Yeah.
Instead of directing that rage at her.
Yeah. And it kind of like continues off when Akito first showed up and was summoning everyone except for Kyo. She's talking about how like even now the cat is left behind, and he's like, don't worry about it. The cat is never invited, and so she's like, oh, the cat got invited. Like,
I mean, that is important too. I mean, it's also like another kind of big change, I think, actually.
Yeah, like I do think it is significant that he got invited, because it's obviously like Akito panicking a little bit.
Akito's definitely scared that Toru's drawing them away, and that I mean, it hasn't been said in so many words, but it's been said that, you know, Akito has this superiority complex, like Akito's better than Toru, and yet it keeps calling them away to draw attention away from Toru to Akito.
Yeah, and so we can actually see like kind of how fragile that superiority complex is with Akito in the conversation with Kyo. Because
every time Kyo questions him.
Yeah, like you were talking about, like Akito's denial in that one scene, which is like one of the most obvious, where he's like literally putting his hands over his ears and like yelling to.
Yeah, Akito doesn't have an argument.
Yeah.
Akito doesn't have an argument ready for that because he doesn't have that information.
Yeah.
He had arguments ready for all those other things, like.
Yeah. And also him just being like snapping and being like, why are you looking at me like that? And like, why do you always make things my fault? Like.
Yes. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's big. I mean, the same tact as everybody else, like denial and like shifting blame onto other people and away from himself, and
but kind of that like wild swing from being like totally like in control to being like acting like a child who's being like accused of something, like.
Yeah, and we've seen Akito act kind of immature before, I think. Like Akito's kind of just like, I want to go home, I want to go back, I want to do this, like.
Yeah.
For starters, and then also just kind of, you know, I don't know, like I actually think that kind of.
And it's also like Akito obviously has a bunch of other issues, but it's also kind of a reminder that Akito's still pretty young.
Akito is young.
He's not that much older than the.
We know that Akito's
kind of the main group. Than
Shigure and Hattori and Ayame, right?
Yeah.
And even Ritsu, because then they say Ritsu was too young to remember in that one chapter about the dream.
They might have, yeah.
Yeah. But whatever, Akito's definitely younger than Shigure and Hattori and Ayame. So it's not clear how much older. And we saw like Akito in that scene with like baby Yuki, and Akito wasn't that much older.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wonder if Akito's actually like closer in age to the teens than to the quote unquote grown-ups of the series. But really I think it's just that Akito has always been in control of people and is able to like, manipulate them and command this power over them, and so has always been catered to, and so has this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely more Akito's many other issues, but I think it's kind of a reminder. Like when you see him acting like such a child, you're like, oh, he's not that old. I'm not much older than these guys.
No. No. And yet they're so much more mature.
Yeah.
I feel like we kind of already talked about sort of like a major theme of this, which is I think like the recalling the Foolish Traveler story really kind of ties that home.
Yeah.
Brings that home. Ties that together. And mixed metaphors.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't have any other things to say that are not spoilery.
Yeah, I think that's my list there.
Yeah. I was thinking today that like someday we're gonna run out of there won't be spoilers to say anymore because things will be happening. I was like, I feel like there are less and less spoilers. It's like, oh yeah, it's because we're getting farther and farther into the series.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's happening.
It's happening. Love. Anyway, okay, good. Well, okay, we're gonna move on to talk about spoilers then. Yay. Oh, I have an important thing to say that I didn't say before. We can increase our count of Kyo bopping Toro on the head.
Yeah.
To 8. Or more.
Yeah.
Every time that comes up, we're like, we should go back and count, but never do.
There's a head bop, and there's also him like catching her by the head, which is.
Yeah, that's right. When she like tripped. Yes.
Yeah.
He's like, just be careful. Yeah. Very good. Okay. Next week, we're gonna talk about chapters 64 and 65.
65. Should be the end of this volume.
And it will be the end of this volume. It'll be the middle of the series. And then after that, we're going to do our mid-series special the following week. So,
oh my god.
It's going to be a good time, guys. Oh my god, it's happening. You can always you can rate and review and subscribe to this if you haven't already done those things, which you probably have. And you can send us questions.
And we appreciate you.
We do. We appreciate you. We appreciate everybody. Thank you all for listening, as always, and thanks for being so kind. I feel like we get a lot of like nice notes and stuff. It's very, very pleasant. So, yes, thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bring your sunblock. You still need it. I mean.
Yeah, for a little while longer. Almost done.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we're back to talk about spoilers quickly, and then bedtime. I mean,
okay.
There's a lot of, so it was the big Kyoko connection reveal, at least the beginning, and there was another, Takaya brought back another image of her, and the phrase, I
won't allow it.
Yes, I won't allow it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, several times, 3 times, I counted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I strategically avoided talking about it too much in the in the first part, but I mean we talked about Kyoko a lot, so hopefully that diverted people's attention. But so here it is. It's happening.
Yeah. One like particular thing I want to make a note of. We were talking about like if we thought it was like baby Kyo or adult Kyo thinking I killed her. I don't know if that bloody arm is supposed to be his mother or Kyoko.
I don't know.
So
I thought it was like it looked like the same. I don't know. It could be her, could not be, but it looks like the arm is the other direction. Like on like as if the person's on their back, and we know that Kyoko's on her front, right?
Yeah.
In that scene that he remembers, at least.
Yeah, like I was leaning toward it just being like this is all like his mother stuff, but since we had the Kyoko reveal in the next chapter, I was like, I wonder. So
it could be. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I'm just looking at if you like kind of flip back and forth between them, it looks like it's the same wrist. You can kind of see the cuff of her shirt.
Yeah,
the image of Kyoko is really freaky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can't see it. Like it cuts off where like the thumb would be.
Yeah.
On the top, so it's hard to tell, but it could be.
And there's a lot of like texture over it, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a little hard to tell. I mean, it's just literally like the bottom of someone's arm, so.
Yeah.
Could be anyone's.
Yeah, I just
it
thought
could
I
be
had
his.
one.
Like he wears a white sweatshirt in that scene too, so. Technically speaking, it could be anyone.
I just thought I had when we were talking about that. So.
I just noticed that Kyo is wearing a striped. His like jacket in the scene where they're on the roof has like 3 stripes. Do you think it's a knockoff Adidas jacket too?
Everything he owns is knockoff Adidas.
It's true. Adidas.
Yes.
It's like, I feel like there aren't going to be a lot of spoilers because there's a lot of reveals. So,
Yeah.
like, one of the big ones is that, like, we don't really get the full story about what happened with him and Kyoko until later. So, like, a lot of that is alluded to. And this is, like, for the first time, other than, like, you know, the times where, the other time where he remembered her, when he had, like, nightmare about her.
Yeah.
So we talked about it in spoilers, I'm sure, but we didn't talk about it
Yeah.
in the regular goings-on of the chapter yet.
Mm-hmm.
There is an image of his mother. Can't remember if that was last time or this time. I think it's this time, these chapters. He has a memory of her, too, while he's talking to Akito, in the argument with Akito.
Yeah, it's like when he's thinking, like, yeah, he's saying, like, his mother could have killed him, so why didn't she, basically? We have a picture of a glimpse of his mother there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we get the first, like, Kyo and Kyoko illusion, like, pretty early, and this is kind of the first time it's really come back.
Yeah. Are you specifically talking about the dream, or, like, a different time?
Like, when he, like remembers something she said exactly. I can't remember exactly when it was, but...
I'll never forgive you. I mean...
Well, something like that,
know.
but I can't remember when exactly it was, but it was a while ago, yeah.
Maybe. I don't remember. But I guess it could have been during, like... Oh, wait. Does he have a memory of her when all the stuff is... The funerals? All his, like, flashbacks? He says that he met a weird woman. I remember when he's talking to Kazuma.
Yeah.
Is it that time?
That's not what I'm thinking of, because that's more recent, but...
Oh, even before that? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's set up from the beginning. We talked a long time ago about...
Yeah.
The timeline is all set up from the beginning. If you're paying attention, then it's like, he's like, oh, Kyo's been gone for 3 months? 3 months he's been gone? Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
4 months, something like that. Yeah, it's very explicit. And Toru's like, my mom died exactly 4 months ago.
Yeah. But yeah, that's really all the only spoiler note I have is, like, Kyo's flashbacks.
That's the only spoiler note I have.
Yeah. I also have the rooster, but we already talked about that last episode, spoilers.
Yeah, that's right. There's a little... Toru's like, maybe Akito's the rooster. No, Akito's not the rooster.
Mm-hmm.
This, like, Yuki and Kyo fight is interesting. I don't have anything, like, particularly spoilery to say about it, but it is interesting that it's changing.
Yeah.
And we see them fight more later. At least, like, I can think of the one at the very end. But
Yeah.
I don't even know...
I don't think there's much in between that, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is significant. Like...
It is significant. It's significant that he didn't punch Yuki in the face. Like,
yeah.
And that Yuki didn't do anything to block him. Yuki knows that he's not going to do anything.
Yeah.
I guess we do get more detail from this scene, the one with Kyo. I feel like the scene where it's like Kyo's all grimy outside. We saw the beginning with Kazuma, from Kazuma's perspective when he finds him. But actually, we see the beginning of it when when it's revealed his like that he was at the accident that killed Toru's mother. So like, there's still more to come from that one scene.
Yeah,
it's in a lot of places. Yeah, so a lot of reveals from the past this time. So therefore, no, not as many spoilers, I guess.
Yeah, it's mostly like, ooh, character development.
Ooh, Kyo's in love. Yes, it was the good shoujo drama.
Yes.
It's the shoujo we signed up for when we started reading this series, I feel like.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the romance that we signed up for in this rom-com.
Yes.
They make a good arc with the two before, the ones that we just read last week. Yeah. We had Yuki's arc, now we have Kyo's arc, and now we'll see what's going to happen after this all, I think.
Yep. And we're going to conclude the beach.
Yeah, next time I think we're concluding the beach. That's why we're having the mid-series special after.
Yep.
It's the end of the beach. / the middle of the series. Yes. As is stated.
Can separate the series into before beach and after beach.
One of the questions that I actually have for you for the mid-series special is, do you think that this is like a 2-act? If you broke it into acts, would that be like a 2-act? Would this be like a 2-act thing, a story? Or is it more like is it broken up in a different way? So think about it, I guess. I wonder if you could break it into are there 3 arcs? Like, can you is it like going up to Kyo's, the true form one? But I don't really think so. I feel like it might be an act 1 and act 2, and this is the beginning of the end of act 1, this beach arc. But I don't know. I guess you
call it kind of a, like, the first part is like setting up the stakes and reveals and everything, and then the second part is like, we gotta break the curse.
Because like, I don't know what the turn. If you break it into 3 acts, then it's like, not everything is set up by the true form. So then, like, where is all the setup? You know, or like, where does the setup kind of end and then the subversion start?
Yeah.
So I feel like in the beach you're kind of starting with some of the subversion and then or whatever it is, I forget. I don't know. It's late. But you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
I do think the
reinforcing of
beach.
what's set up. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think the beach arc's definitely a turning point. So for a lot of characters and just the series in general.
Well, I guess I should say that question for next week. I mean, it's fine. I'll think about it. Or like next week, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely key turning point. So anyway, I think we can end our episode here today.
Okay.
Very few spoilers. I wonder when there will be a day with no spoilers.
The
I guess we'll
chapter.
find out. Well, obviously. We can do spoilers for like another.
Yeah. Spoilers for a random series. It's completely unrelated to Fruits Basket.
Yeah, Dumbledore's gay. I mean, what?
Yeah.
Although it's technically not a spoiler. Wait, who was the mother in How I Met Your Mother? I mean, oh wait, was that last episode? My bad. Yeah, that's right, because we talked about sandcastles.
Yeah.
Never mind. Continuity jokes.
It was his sled.
The mother was the sled.
Yes. Mother was the sled, and also she killed Dumbledore.
Oh right, how could I have forgotten? All right, that's enough jokes, bad jokes for now. I think we'll save the rest of our bad jokes for next time.
Yeah, we gotta dole them out, you know.
Yeah.
Can't just give them all out at once.
We can talk about holes again. I
We'll
mean,
ruin the bad jokes economy.
Okay, thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.